The Bride of the Cursed Lake. Chapter 5. Feathers in the Wind. Part 3. The cottage lay dark and breathless when I returned, the sharp crack of dusk like bones on stone. The walls held their breath as I stepped inside, the place straining beneath the memory of what had happened here. My head swam with Lilith's words, with the fracture of certainty, with a grief too wild to bear. I dropped the pages to the floor, and they scattered like fallen birds. The cottage watched me, as though waiting for my next move, waiting for me to finish what I had started. I moved through the dark, through the emptiness, through the shape of Anna's absence. I could still see the outline of her in the hollow of every room, in the corners where silence refused to die. The ghosts of our days together drifted past me, pale as the morning light, cruel as love. A madness crept through my veins like frost. My blood pounded against the walls, the windows, the soft edges of memory. A gasp, a whisper, a sound like forgiveness. The creak of the floorboards, the press of the dark, the unbearable heaviness of Anna not there. The bedroom held its breath, the hollow of her pillow an accusation. I moved toward it, weighed down by the ache of not knowing, of almost believing. And then I saw it, bright against the darkness, impossible, unmistakable. A single white feather, soft as breath, resting where her head should have been. My body froze. I stared, waiting for my mind to explain it away. But there it was, still and certain. I'd watched the first one drift out over the lake, watched it catch the light and vanish into the mist. It should have been gone. It should have been gone. But here it was again, like a dare, like a message. My hand hovered above it, uncertain, unwilling. This wasn't a bird's gift. This was something else. Something returned. Something sent. I reached out at last, fingertips brushing its edge, half expecting it to dissolve into air. Instead, the feather felt warm, disturbingly warm. Its heat crawling up my skin, burning my fingers like a warning. I recoiled, then caught myself, pressed my shaking hand around it, too afraid to hold on, too afraid to let it go. The pulse of the feather matched my own, wild and rhythmic, the tempo of madness, the measure of despair. I felt it worm its way into my mind, the language of blood, the language of ghosts, the language of never letting go. I moved through the dark with it, through the thick air, through the memories and shadows, and the weight of Anna's soul. Lilith's words bled together with the panic in my mind, the awful certainty that transformation had already begun, that there was no turning back. It chose who belonged to it. It remembered what we forgot. It was and wasn't and never could be. I had to know. I had to understand. The notes and manuscripts I'd taken from Lilith lay scattered across the floor, pages tangled in a chaos of ink and desperation. I dropped to my knees, frantic, my hands shaking as if the cold breath of the lake itself had followed me home. Each sheet seemed to hum with the weight of ritual, the burden of old promises, the echo of a curse that refused to be silenced. They stared back at me, these pages, accusing, relentless, as if Anna herself had written them, as if her hand had traced the feathers, the shapes, the unfinished lines. I felt their edges bite into my fingers, sharp as the memory of her voice, raw as the fear that I might never understand. The truth was there, close enough to taste, yet still just beyond my grasp. I was obsessed, drawn so deeply into the spiral of it that I couldn't see the edges anymore. I spread the notes wider, faster, the pages circling around me like prey, like prophecy. At the center of it all, the map I'd drawn from whispers and borrowed hours. Red string webbed its surface, the spiderwork of connections I hadn't dared to see. Names, dates, places, all leading back to the lake, all pointing to the dark heart of knowing. A small and endless distance, a short and unbearable forever. I took the feather and pinned it at the heart of the map, as if anchoring the madness that spiraled out around it. The pulse of it throbbed beneath my fingers, steady and insistent, as though the feather itself were alive, or as though it had claimed a part of me. I rifled through the notes again, the fragile paper crackling beneath my touch, each page worn thin by time and by the weight of too much hope. Lilith's words echoed in my head, winding themselves through my thoughts like vines. Not lost, only changed, always waiting. The strain of it all trembled in my hands, my focus blurring with exhaustion. When I turned one page too quickly, its edge sliced deep across my palm. I gasped at the sting, watching as blood welled up, bright and sudden, dripping onto the notes below, like a signature I hadn't meant to leave. Blood bloomed across the notes, sharp and vivid against the faded ink, as if the truth itself had finally cut me open. I stared at the spreading stain, transfixed by the way it crept through the paper, seeping into every word, every line, every desperate connection I had drawn. The sting of the cut barely registered, a small, distant thing compared to the weight pressing down on my chest. Somewhere beneath the ache and the exhaustion, I felt the pull of the lake again, the same slow gravity that had taken her, the same hunger that now circled me. I pressed my wounded palm harder against the page, as if the blood could bind me to the answers I still couldn't reach, as if it could force the story to speak. The feather lay nearby, watching like an eye half shut, awaiting its hour. I lifted my gaze, watched the symbols carved into the beams, press themselves into my mind, press themselves into the shape of what I'd refused to see. I'd thought them mere decoration when we first moved in, had believed them a quaint addition to the rustic life we'd imagined. I hadn't known. I hadn't wanted to know. Now they burned into my vision with the force of truth, the force of fate. Swans and feathers, lines and cycles, patterns I couldn't ignore, didn't dare ignore. The same patterns drawn into the margins of Lilith's notes. My pulse quickened, feverish, desperate, alive. I dipped the tip of the feather into my own blood, watched it soak red, watched it fill with the color of madness. It felt alive in my grip, alive with possibility, with the raw certainty that this was how I would reach her. This was how I would keep her. This was how I would know. I drew the symbols into the margins, scrawled them like confessions, like pleas, like last rites. The lines blurred, the world blurred. The only thing I knew was the name of my wife, the name that refused to let me go. The air thickened, swirled around me, closed in like a mouth, like the hungry mist of the lake. My movements were frantic, driven, wild. I covered the pages with those same bleeding shapes over and over and over, until I didn't know if I was repeating myself or if they were repeating me. My vision swayed, reeled, collapsed. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't hold the shape of my own thoughts. The symbols seemed to float above me, red on white, blood on paper, soul on soul. The cottage spun, became a lake, became a mist, became a madness. I stumbled into the bathroom, my limbs shaking, my body tearing itself apart with each breath. The mirror greeted me with an emptiness I hadn't expected, with a reflection I didn't recognize. Deep shadows stretched beneath my eyes, shadows darker than grief, darker than night, darker than the feathers that beat against the hollow place where my heart had been. It was me. It was not me. It was the shape of someone losing himself, becoming someone else, becoming no one. I touched the cold surface of the glass, watched it shiver, watched the familiar stranger on the other side. It was the first crack,